Good evening, friends. Okay, so let us continue with the behavioral approach. So, we already talked about the context in which the behavioral approach developed. So, today we will be starting with, first we will talk about the concept of behavioral approach. The concept related with the behavioral approach. So, if we talk about the behavioral approach, essentially behavioral approach tries to do what? And whatever I am talking about, it is already written actually here. I am just going to summarize what is written in this. Okay. So, if you talk about behavioral approach to human geography, what it does, behavioral approach essentially to human geography, it attempts to understand human activity in space or geographical space by doing what? By studying it at a disaggregate level of analysis. Disaggregate level of analysis. That means what it is trying to do, in other words, what it is trying to do, it is trying to study based on the variety of individual behavior found in the world. So, see, what was the consequence of quantitative revolution was that quantitative revolution did what? It aggregated all human beings as one. And which human being quantitative revolution was studying? Anyone can tell me? Which human being quantitative revolution was studying? It was rational economic human being. So, all human beings were aggregated into one type, and this was the main problem of quantitative revolution. It was seen by behavioral approach. Already we have seen, because human behavior varies from person to person, and thus the decisions which are taken with respect to the environment, they are also found to be variable. Okay? So, that is the basic idea of the behavioral approach. Behavioral approach was trying to study the same phenomena from the perspective, if you talk about, of disaggregate level of analysis. So, can I assume that you have understood what here the term disaggregate level of analysis means? Key idea of the behavioral approach is what? That models and theories of human geography can be improved. The models and geographies which were being formulated already in quantitative evolution, such model and theories can be improved by incorporating more realistic assumptions about human behavior. For example, tell me, we saw that quantitative revolution was taking distance as objective phenomena. But can I say that behavioral geography would treat distance as more subjective variable? Yes or no? Distance is a more subjective variable. Tell me, for example, this Diwali I am thinking of going to my hometown, Lucknow. I am planning, maybe I will be going for 1-2 days. Now, when I go to Lucknow, if I have to suppose go to some relative or somewhere, or even going that 10-15 kilometers, hardly in Lucknow you go, the places which are located, they are not too much far away, maximum 20-25 kilometers they are. So even going that 15 kilometers, 20 kilometers would look like so much big burden. While I am in Delhi, I am like, where I am staying and where is my office, it is already 10 kilometers. So it was like frequent, 10 kilometers to kuch bhi nahi hai, to roz ka tha. And you know, people are living 40 kilometers. Even if I have to suppose go Gurgaon, etc., it is 30 kilometers all normally, and it's not too much of a big burden. So can you understand how much the perspective essentially is tied with the factor of distance? You might have experienced this by yourself. Many times we are like, we are not in a mood to go outside. So even going to the nearby shop would be what? Would look like a big burden. Oh, so much far away, kaise jaunga? But when you are in a very good mood, you want to travel or do something, it is like, it would be, if I am in your place, if you tell me if I am in a mood, you just tell me and I'll take my car and I can go anywhere. It will not be a problem. Okay? So that is the basic idea of the subjectivity of distance. Take one more example. Suppose there is, you want to eat burger, and वो burger खाने के लिए there are two choice, either I go out and eat burger or pizza, whatever. Second choice is I just use Zomato or Swiggy, etc., and I just order it at home. Obviously, when you are eating warm in the restaurant, it is a different feeling altogether. But most of the time, what we'll do, like the distance is too much. Today you see that how much the growth of the Swiggy, Zomato has taken place because of that. But suppose karo ki last time you went to one restaurant, maybe it is far away, and there one beautiful waitress or waiter smiled at you, where from next time you will be going to eat pizza or burger? Tell me. It is obvious, वो कितना भी दूर हो, 7 समुंदर पार भी करना पड़े, doesn't matter. So that is the basic aspect of distance. Distance is a highly subjective term, and it has to be taken how people realize distance. Okay, what is the mental image of that distance in the mind of the people? Okay, you have to study those mental images that people carry in their mind. Then you will be essentially able to understand and utilize the conception of this distance as a variable. Okay, so that is the basic idea. In fact, it says that what people think what people are thinking arises from perceptual knowledge acquired via the senses. This knowledge is then done what? Is organized and interpreted by the existing beliefs and schematic knowledge structure and processes. Knowledge, structure and processes. Okay. So what we are saying is, we see something, there is a reality, and we see something, we see that reality, we perceive that reality. Perceptual filters perceive that reality. But this reality is organized in our mind we interpret that reality according to our existing beliefs and already the type of structure that I have in my mind of looking at the phenomena. So same thing might appear to be different for different people. Like for example, today Supreme Court ultimately released Arnab. Goswami. So there are two groups. One is the critical group who is questioning that why this same idea of justice was not applied to the other cases, other similar type of cases, including the journalists who are already they have been in jail for almost 1 year, 2 years. There is second group of people who are basically celebrating it as a symbol of liberty and freedom. The democratic belief system has been strengthened for them. You see, the phenomena is same, but this same phenomena has been interpreted by people differently. Okay? So this is what the behavioral geography is talking about. And Pranit is asking, it looks much complicated to study every individual. We'll talk about that, Pranit. Just first try to understand what it is all about. Okay? Thus, if you talk about what people think, here we are saying, thus what it does, people think it arises from where? or it arises or is product of their genetics and experiential history. इसको हटा देता हूँ because it is not like this. The same thing. So this interpretation we are talking about, this interpretation actually arises from where? What is our genes and how ultimately what type of phenomena we have experienced, what type of mental setup that I have. ठीक है? And also is mediated by symbolic representations such as maps and languages. ठीक है? So very clearly अभी हम देखेंगे, मैं इसके लिए एक डायग्राम, some diagrams are there, we'll talk about them, but basically the thing is you cannot say that the phenomena is exactly objective. What people will see, it would not depend just upon the objective phenomena, it would be function of the subjective reality that they contain within themselves. ठीक है? So tell me, can I say behavioral geography is thus saying one very important thing, that what we see as reality, is mixture of objective and subjective. Yes or no? Tell me. It is mixture of objective and the subjective reality. So tell me, can I say, does this means that behavioral geography tries to find a middle path? Find a middle path between this objective and the subjective aspect. ठीक है? So to elaborate it more further, you can see wait here, just give me 1 minute. You see this one diagram, and you make this diagram also. It is the conventional model of man-environment relationship after Boulding in 1956. It is not there in your material, so please draw this diagram. A conventional model of man-environment relationship after Boulding in 1956. So can you see what is there? There is environment. So environment is what? Tell me. First, there is presence of an environment. So can I say this environment ultimately provides, we see this environment and create an image of it, and this image ultimately, the image that we have of the environment or the reality, this would ultimately frame our behavior. We'll take decisions and those decisions would ultimately become our behavior. Okay? But tell me, will this image also have influence on environment? Yes. Our behavior will also influence the image. If we are successful, then what will happen? We'll have a positive behavior. If we are continuously experiencing failure, then we'll tend to have what? Negative behavior. And this behavior obviously is going to influence the environment. So this is a conventional diagram of man-environment relationship. This is a better diagram which more in fact elaborates that diagram. So इसको थोड़ा सा टाइम लेकर के बनाते हैं. Let us see. Okay. So this is environmental perception and behavior, which was drawn by Downs. So environmental perceptions and behavior after Downs. So see, first what is present here? Can you see there is a real world. Are we ready to draw this diagram? Tell me fast. Satish, I will answer you how maps can be subjective. I'll answer you. Wait for that. So there is real world. Real world, can I say this real world is the objective reality? This is the objective reality. Now from this real world, we'll ultimately get information. This would provide us several informations. Okay, will be same thing. This pen and different people will be able to see different depending upon how their perception receptors are strong. They'll be able to see several details. So this real world will give me several informations, and these information would be what? This would be received by my perceptual receptors. Perceptual receptors. You know, various forms of perceptual receptors are there. Our ears, we can hear through them, we can see by our eyes, touch, smell. Okay? So our perceptual receptors would be doing what? Would be ultimately receiving these informations. Then this would pass through our perceptual filters. Perceptual filters. Okay? So we will not receive all the information, we will not take all the information, just we will filter out some of the information. We will take only what we feel is correct. Okay, what is suitable to us. And what determines this perceptual filters? Our experiential histories, our genetics. Okay? So you can understand this perceptual filter is determined by what? It is determined by two things, two factors, genetics plus our experiential history. So I have given you this example before also. If I tell you make a portrait of me, all of you would be drawing a different image of me. But I am the same reality. Then why you all will be not drawing me as same? Simple reason is because your different people have their own perceptual strength. Some people can see even minute details, perceive even minute details. Some people have different type of strength. They won't be able to see those minute details. In fact, you must have seen several people have very good art, drawing they can do. So how they can do that? Basically, their perceptual filters or perceptual strength is very strong. Okay? Perceptual organs, they can even perceive very small details, and that is why they can make those very beautiful portraits. Whatever, but that is basically the case of perceptual filters. There can be also experiential history. For example, tell me, in India, if you talk about, there is some information that I am receiving. Okay? And suppose someone comes and tells me that if you vote for me, I will give you 15 lakh. 15 lakh रुपए मिलेंगे. And again, ideally, what should have happened? Can I say I should have taken only that thing which was more important to me? I should have asked questions कि भाई 15 लाख ठीक है, बट 15 लाख को आप मल्टीप्लाई करके देखिए कितने लोगों को देना पड़ेगा. So how exactly you will be doing that? Question should have been asked, but we didn't. ठीक है, we didn't ask those questions. And what was one of the basic reasons was that we haven't been trained actually through our childhood. We haven't been trained to critically analyze the phenomena. You know, India में there are बच्चा पैदा होता है, child is born, and as the child is growing, if child asks even silly questions to parents, ठीक है, so many questions are in our mind as children, and if we ask them to our father, suppose our father or parents are saying कि do this, if I ask कि मैं ऐसा क्यों करूं, you can understand what the hell would be falling on me. And in majority of cases, the first statement that father, if particularly father is there, so he first statement of the father will be अपने बाप से सवाल पूछता है. So in such a scenario, you can understand very clearly what will happen with our ability to think critically. It would be suppressed. So our experiential histories would also determine what we will perceive and what we will ultimately filter out. Very clearly, this information which has been received now would be organized by our value system. We'll try to find a meaning in this information through our value system, and we all have our value systems. We are conditioned, no matter whoever is there and he says that no, I am very objective. Okay, I am very objective. Everyone in this world is affected by his own value system. ठीक है, Sherlock Holmes भी आगे कहे तो you can understand. He must also would have been affected by his value system. So it can vary. So many factors determine our value system: society, our experiential histories, religion. Okay? So there is a value system. What type of value system you have got ultimately. Based upon that, what will happen? We will create a mental image of the phenomena. A mental image of the phenomena. ठीक है. And depending upon this mental image, what will happen? We will ultimately take our decisions. सिंपल सा इमेज का एक सिंपल सा एक एग्जाम्पल दूं तो सी व्हाट these movies have done to you. You all have seen those these movies, Bollywood movies particularly, Hollywood movies particularly. In all these movies you will be always seeing one very common thing, that the main actor, the hero of the movie is always what, a very handsome, a very chocolatey type of boy, girl or actress who is there. So very very beautiful looking, white particularly. ठीक है. In fact even in you see India में तो वो Tollywood and उधर भी की भी movies में they always try to make them look so much beautiful and white. ठीक है. So what these type of movies have essentially done to the perception of the people, that if you see a person like for example who is like normal, थोड़ा सा villain type का दिखता है नहीं है, that is different thing. But if he looks like कि दाढ़ी वाड़ी बढ़ी हुई है and not too much taking care of himself, will ultimately get a perception कि यार ये क्या बंदा है, मतलब it is like maybe he is not a so much good person. यार हो सकता है कि उसको बेचारे को दाढ़ी बनाने का टाइम नहीं मिला हो, just because he was so much busy with work. He must be, maybe he was so much hard working. And if you see a chocolatey type of very beautiful person or even female, again you'll get an idea, oh, very very good person he must be. And normally if you are good looking, what will happen? You will automatically get a different respect in the society. If you don't look that type, then again your respect would be down. Why? Because people make, suddenly they, without even knowingly, they will make image in their mind about you. Okay? And it all goes from where? It all goes from, if you go into the history, the struggle which occurred when the Aryans arrived, and ultimately the struggle that they had with the Dravidians, they overpowered Dravidian. Okay? So the Dravidians थे, they looked black in color. As a result, ultimately what happened कि they were treated as, you know, Rakshas. So Rakshas जो हमारे mythology में है, basically this Rakshas was not. Rakshas कौन थे? Rakshas were the Dravidian people essentially, and the proto-Australoids who were there. बाद में बात करेंगे इनके बारे में. So this is what it has done to our images. So what you do, you unknowingly you will make an image. This image will ultimately determine your decision. So again, if someone is looking bad, like, so your decision would be probably कि why to talk with this person, जरूरत क्या है उससे बात करने की. ठीक है. So it would ultimately affect your decision. This decision is in turn going to affect the real world. In fact, it would, if this decision is taken again and again, tell me, can I say that this decision would become part of my behavior? Yes or no? This decision would essentially become part of my behavior. Okay? So that is basically the key idea of behavioral approach. Can you understand this? So behavioral approach wants to work where? Behavioral approach recognizes that focus of quantitative revolution was just on this world. There was neglect of what? There was neglect of this subjective parameters were neglected. This image which was being made, all these subjective parameters were neglected. So behavioral approach wants to work in this domain and try to understand how ultimately people formulate their decision, formulate their images. And again, as I said, it is based upon inductive approach. So what is the basic idea? That if we have enough case studies, then through their study what we can do, we can find common patterns. ठीक है, common patterns. Like for example, India में देखो, almost everyone you will be finding they are racist. No matter how much good looking, no matter how much respected people they are in the society, almost all of them are racist. And racism का example देखना है तो you just take the newspaper of the day and ultimately you look into that, वो matrimonial वाले column को उठा लो and you will be finding how much racist and casteist we are. So इंडिया में कास्ट और रेस एक्चुअली में मिक्स हो गया है. ठीक है. सो इफ यू कैन फाइंड दोस, यस फेयर एंड लवली वो तो इट इज वर्ल्ड वाइड फिनोमेना, बट यस, सो इफ यू कैन ultimately find those common things, then you can ultimately reach to general conclusions. ठीक है. So that is basically the basic idea of behavioral approach. Rahul is asking, isn't according to DNA study of Rakhi Gadi Aryan migration theory proved wrong? Again, see Rahul, the thing is that history is made by those who write history. ठीक है. So there are two types of history. One is, you can say, the liberal leftist history, and other is the rightist history. They will always fight amongst each other. There are so many other evidences which suggest about the basic idea of the Aryan migration. What essentially the right history is trying to tell us basically is that there is a kind of parallel evolution occurred in India. अलग से वो Aryans पैदा हो गए थे, which is totally nonsense. I find it really nonsense if you read it in detail. Okay. Why are Indians racist? We'll talk about that in race topic. ठीक है, कल्चरल सेटिंग में हम उसकी बात करेंगे. Don't deflect me from the topic here in hand. Okay, so that is basically the basic idea of ultimately behavioral approach. So behavioral approach is essentially saying what? It is trying to find a kind of middle path. ठीक है, a middle path. What it essentially does, the behavioral approach. So what is the essence of this behavioral approach? See, so we can say that behavioral approach or fundamental argument of behavioral approach are, there are three fundamental arguments which it talks about, and these are: people have environmental images, second, stream is okay यार, how video stop बोल रहे हो. Those images can be identified accurately by the researchers, and the third is there is strong relationship between environmental images and behavior, actual behavior. ठीक है. So see, this is the basic argument of behavioral approach. So behavioral approach पहले ही बात क्या बोलता है, people have environmental images. जो अभी हमने यहाँ पर mental image देखा, this people have their mental image about the realities. ठीक है. You can understand, like if you talk about mental image, अभी मैंने बताया about one that mental image of people, how we have been able to get those mental images. India में you see most of our gods are essentially what? They are all white. Other things you will be finding like the society is framed in such a manner that almost everywhere you will be finding there are symbols which try to ultimately make us have a particular type of mental image. ठीक है. Like if you talk about almost everywhere male dominancy symbols majority of जगहों पे मिल जाएंगे. Majority religion के symbols. एक छोटा सा example देखो. We'll be soon having the new year, and in this new year many times you might have seen कि वो घर पे सब free में सब आता है, and one of the things which is coming in free almost is the calendar. Have you seen that? वो shop वाला कभी छपवा लिया किसी ने, and from office you might have seen parents bring those calendars, new year calendars, and almost always you will be finding that there would be religious pictures there. At so many public places you will be finding again some religious pictures, and this is again what? Trying to show the dominancy of the majority which is there in India. ये स्ट्रीम ने तो परेशान कर दिया यार. From my side the stream is very consistently high. It is always over 1600 kbps. I don't know why it is sticking for you. Okay, that means there are some individual problems. Yes, ठीक है यार. Okay, ठीक है. So people have what? People have variety of type of environmental images. अब यहाँ पर मुरारी is saying वो भगवान के राम is black, कल्कि is black, कृष्णा is black. फोटो दिखाना यार मेरे को, जितनी फोटो में तुम देखते हो, एक फोटो लेके आओ वो ब्लैक वाली, सब में वाइट दिखाता है. इट इज ओके कि व्हाट इज रिटन इज डिफरेंट, उसको छोड़ो अब, डोंट आर्ग्यू विद दैट. ओके, सो हियर वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट द एनवायरमेंटल इमेजेस. दीज इमेजेस कैन बी आइडेंटिफाइड एक्यूरेटली बाय द रिसर्चर्स. और भी एनवायरमेंटल इमेजेस के सो मेनी एग्जाम्पल्स यू कैन अंडरस्टैंड. And like for example, very frequently I have an argument with my mother. So suppose we have to go to market, and my mom would say that let's go to market, and I am surprised, idhar market is that side, udhar hai. So can you see the case of the mental image? She has a different world image, a different world image than me. Maybe she is not going so much out, so she doesn't understand the space, the geographical space, as I am understanding, because I am going out every day. Okay? So every person has an environmental image with respect to the real world which is surrounding him, the environment which surrounds him. So that is first argument of the behavioral approach. Okay? There is no doubt there is some kind of image that we have. You call it image, you call it information, you call it map, whatever you call it, there is something we always carry about our environment surrounding us. So that is first thing we agree. Second, those images can be identified accurately by the researchers. Okay? This is the second argument of behavioral approach. So behavioral approach says that if you actually study the people, ultimately will be able to discover these mental images from the mind of the people. So it talks about many ways in which it can be done, like for example, Gould, who developed mental mapping approach, developed a ranking procedure. So for example, you give a list of, suppose if I give a list of things or and ask you to rank them in order according to your preference. Okay? So what you will do, you will rank first. Suppose you think that most important, suppose I give you a list of things and I will do this. So there is money, honesty, power, self satisfaction, family, needs, career goals, etc. So many हो सकते हैं. Now, if I ask you people to rank them according to your preference, why you want to become civil servant. सिविल सर्वेंट. एक दो चीज़ें और भूल गया. वेट, serving the nation, helping poor and needy. Okay. So now if I ask you ultimately to rank these according to your preference on why you want to become civil servant, can you do that? I'll give you 1 minute. Okay. Now if I try to find out, I know कि इसमें से बहुत सारे लोग होंगे. ये अगर मैं सबका एवरेज निकालूंगा जितने लोगों ने किया होगा तो ये नंबर 1 आएगा. And again maybe some of you would put here self satisfaction, टू हेल्पिंग पुअर एंड नीडी भी टॉप में होगा, आई एम वेरी श्योर। ठीक है, एंड फिर उसके बाद डेफिनेटली उसमें ऑनेस्टी मे बी 4 आएगा, एंड उसके बाद यू विल फाइंड, अच्छा इसमें और कौन सा दिख रहा है, फैमिली नीड्स थोड़ा सा सेल्फिश सा हो जा रहा है, सो उसको नीचे रखते हैं। कैरियर गोल्स, हाँ इट लुक्स गुड, सो कैरियर गोल्स। ठीक है, देखो यहाँ पे मुरारी हैज़ ऑलरेडी गिवन हिज लिस्ट एंड हेल्पिंग द नीडी, सेल्फ सेटिस्फैक्शन। ओके, फैमिली नीड्स, if you talk about, so many people will keep it here at 6, 7, 8, मनी वाला सबसे लास्ट में ही रखा जाएगा। Okay, some of you would be placing that, but let me see, because here we cannot see who people are you. I cannot see you, who are you. Will you be able to do the same thing when an unknown person is asking you in an interview or something like that? That is the question. ठीक है, so how many of you really, मतलब if suppose many people will be saying serving the nation, तो अबे serving the nation करना है तो tell me किसने रोका है तुम्हें? अभी भी कर सकते हो। Don't you think a farmer is serving the nation? हाँ? Don't you think I am serving the nation? Don't you think everybody who does his work properly with sincerity is serving the nation? हाँ? हेल्पिंग द नीडी, देखो ये भी एक नंबर 1 है इसका, मुरारी का। किसने रोका भाई तुम्हें अभी हेल्पिंग द पुअर एंड नीडी पीपल? देयर आर सो मेनी पीपल विदाउट बीइंग सिविल सर्वेंट, दे आर एवरी डे डूइंग दिस। So actually what happens, we'll see that this was the method, various type of such methods were talked about by behavioral approach, as we will be able to objectively understand the mind of the people. ठीक है, but in reality when it comes to people, once you know that people are observing you, tell me, don't you think that your behavior changes? Yes or no? Don't you think that your behavior changes? Your behavior essentially changes. ठीक है, अब रियलिटी क्या है? रियल इज दिस, पावर सबसे टॉप पे होता है when you want to become a civil servant. Second comes money, there is no doubt about that. All of them want part of that corruption pie, which is the biggest, or the big pie which is there. So most of them ultimately will go and be partner in that pie. It is a real truth, no matter what anyone says here. बाकी सब बाद में, this is the real thing, and we have been taught like this. We have been actually taught like this. Because these are, we consider it to be very, very important. So what is the problem? We'll see. इसको criticism में हम बाद में बात करेंगे. ठीक है, we'll talk about it later on in criticism, but we'll see that once human beings know that they are being observed, their behavior ultimately changes. They would become the most ideal person, perfect person on this earth. ठीक है, so but can you understand this idea of images can be identified accurately by the researcher? Third, Here Balbir say initially people want to be honest, but system makes them, it is an excuse, Balbir. There are so many people who are actually very honest and are fighting the system. So it is just an excuse for those who already wanted to be corrupt. Okay. There is a strong relationship, third, between environmental images and actual behavior. ठीक है, अभी से देख लो इसका, बलवीर का, अभी से इसका ऑलरेडी रेडी है कि आई हैव टू बिकम करप्ट, एंड ही इज टॉकिंग अबाउट ऑल दिस नॉनसेंस. So there is a strong relationship between environmental images and actual behavior. So what they say that why we have to study this, because the behavior, the actual decisions that would be taken, they are strongly influenced by these images that we carry in our mind. ठीक है, that we are carrying in our mind. Again, it's maybe true. Just now we gave the example that if we feel like this person, if we feel like that this person is not a good person, can I say that you will not talk to that person? Yes, because I have a particular type of image about that person. ठीक है. So in some cases it may be true, no doubt about that, but we will see that ultimately it is not always the case. We have our own mental realities, mental images. We want to do many things, but are we able to do that? Tell me. I want to do so many things. If it was all about mental images, then maybe I was not teaching here. Maybe I would be doing something, going and doing some research. If it was all about these mental images, environmental images. There are economic realities, there are political realities. Psychological reality is only one thing. ठीक है. There are social realities. You ask women in the society, how much, if you talk about how much their freedom is curtailed. They want to do so many things in life, but they cannot do just because our society will not allow them. So it may and may not be that there must be relationship between the environmental images and the actual behavior. ठीक है. So however, this is the basic idea on which the behavioral approach is based. So it says that what we can do, because people have environmental image, we can, through talking through various different type of methods, we would be able to extract those images. We would be ultimately extract those images, we would be ultimately able to study those images, find common patterns, and ultimately understand why people are behaving in a certain manner. ठीक है. So I hope you understood what is essentially behavioral approach. ठीक है. Let's go a little bit more further into this, and okay. So for example, let us see here a similar but slightly more complex classification came from Porteous, who recognized existence of, इसको लिख लो, I think it is not there in your material. Okay, it is not there. So I am just talking about this. अच्छा दिया हुआ, ठीक है. You see here, Porteous recognized the existence of three type of environments. One was the phenomenal environment, that is related with the physical objects. Then there was a personal environment, that is perceived images of the phenomenal environment. Third, contextual environment, that is the environment which includes culture, religious beliefs, expectations, etc. That is the concept. Contextual is what? It is the social environment, socio-cultural environment. Personal का मतलब है psychological environment. So he is also talking about the same thing. So you have to understand these environments, then ultimately you will be able to arrive at the realistic models and theories. According to him, the decisions of individuals are based upon the influence of these environment. ठीक है? Based upon these environments. So that is what we essentially mean by when we say that behavioral approach. Also, if you talk about behavioral approach, other things, aspects of behavioral approach, according to behavioral approach, the human environment relationship is highly dynamic and bi-directional. It is bi-directional. ठीक है, जो अभी हमने देखा, ह्यूमन इज नाउ नॉट ओनली अफेक्टेड बाय एनवायरमेंट बट इज इन टर्न affecting the environment as well. What is our behavior? It would ultimately very clearly do what? It would affect change the environment, and this will again be affected by this change in environment. So it is a very complex relationship, not a simplistic relationship which was seen as under deterministic ideas like quantitative revolution. It is very clear. From this, the environments that we are talking about, suppose so many environments that we have to study. Tell me, according to behavioral approach, can I say human geography should become what? Multidisciplinary? Yes or no? Human geography should adopt a multidisciplinary approach, not only a single type of approach, which is like in quantitative revolution, the approach was mostly economic approach was being adopted. But economy is only one facet of the realities which affect us. So it wanted what? It wanted that ultimately we should be adopting, or in geography a multidisciplinary approach should have been adopted. ठीक है, ये बात क्लियर हो गई? So can you understand now the basic idea of behavioral approach? Always remember, despite the fact that behavioral approach was studying behavior, what was the ultimate objective of behavioral approach? What was the ultimate objective of the behavioral approach? The ultimate objective of the behavioral approach was to formulate universal models, theories and laws. ठीक है? In essence, we can say that the behavioral approach has also been referred to as the pragmatic approach. pragmatic approach, because it was trying to show what? It was trying to show pragmatism in theory making, model making. Okay, it was basically what? It was a kind of middle path. Okay, behavioral approach essentially is mixture. It is middle path. Why we are saying? Because it is coming from a mixture of two philosophies. One is the positivistic philosophy and other is the idealistic philosophy. आइडियलिस्टिक फिलॉसफी. ठीक है. सो इन दोनों को मिल करके बनता है, इट इज फॉर्म्ड बिहेवियरल अप्रोच इज फॉर्म्ड. ठीक है. नाउ positivism you already know. Idealism was a type of humanism which believed that you can know about the ideas of people if you carefully study their ideas. ठीक है. You can know about what people are thinking. Yes, it is a kind of synthesis, Darpan. So, if you can know basically, or you can know the ideas of people or the mind of the people, you can study what they are thinking if you ultimately study their ideas. ठीक है. एक छोटा सा एग्जांपल देता हूं आइडियलिज्म का, यू विल बेटर अंडरस्टैंड. If you talk about Columbus discovered America. All of you must be aware of that. But he wanted to discover India. In fact, he went on to search India. But he discovered America. तो ऐसा क्यों हुआ? Because we know that he went in search towards west through a ship route, that is sea route, in search of India. He already knew that India was in the east. So if I just try to think कि ऐसा उसने क्यों किया होगा, why he would have done that? Tell me, can we say that one, he would have thought that earth is a sphere? Yes or no? He would have thought that earth is a sphere. पहली बात. That is why he knew that even if I sail towards west, I will ultimately reach east. Second thing, he must have thought other things as well, like he must have thought that sea route was comparatively safe. Yes or no? Because land route would have been more difficult, filled with in between tribes can attack, etc. can happen. Sea route was comparatively more safe. He would have thought. Third thing, he would have thought that earth was small. If he knew that earth was so much big that it would take so many days ultimately through the sea route to ultimately reach India, he would still, abhi usne Pacific, you can understand, he didn't have the chance to cross Pacific. If he would have had to cross the Pacific, what things he would have faced? He would have definitely thought that earth was small. So can you see that over here, when I am doing this, what I am doing? I am doing idealism. I am trying to objectively understand the idea of a person. ठीक है. I am trying to, not objectively, I am trying to just rationally study. Rational is a better word. Rationally study the idea of the person and trying to understand his frame of mind. ठीक है. So this is basically the aspect of behavioral approach. So हम देखेंगे idealism is a sub approach of humanism. याद है हमने बात किया था नॉन एंटाई रियलिज्म. So it is a sub approach within anti-realism, but a type of more rational approach within anti-realism. So we will see out of all the humanistic views, which approach was adopted by the behavioral approach. It was idealistic approach was adopted, because no doubt that behavioral approach was a kind of neo-positivist. Its aim was to formulate models and theories. It never wanted to indulge in so much of subjectivities. ठीक है. In reality हम देखेंगे criticism में that, do you remember that middle path हमने एक बार और बात किया था. Do you remember that middle path? When did we talk about that middle path? We talked about that middle path, if you remember, in neo-determinism. So why that middle path? Why Taylor had to talk about stop and go determinism? Because we saw that in the interwar period after the Second World War, there was strong criticism of determinism began to arrive. And ultimately, to make sure that they don't become irrelevant, the determinists, to make sure that they don't become irrelevant, what they had to do? They had to have some kind of approach, a kind of middle path. ठीक है. It is something like कि once initially you are like very stubborn, है कुछ नहीं, I will not accept, I will not accept. But once the other person arguments become very strong and you are on the back foot, then you will say नहीं 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 ठीक है, आप जो कह रहे हैं वो ठीक है, but मेरी भी बात ठीक है, सो बीच का रास्ता निकालते हैं. ठीक है. So it is something like this. That was the case of the stop and go determinism of Taylor, and here same thing is the case of behavioral approach. If you remember, we talked about that majority of the behavioral approach geographers was the positivistic geographers. So it was for them and a kind of identity crisis which was emerging with the failure of quantitative revolution. So to ensure that they remain relevant, they had to do what? They had to incorporate the second viewpoint, the opposing viewpoint as well. So they found a way and they ultimately merged both the viewpoints. That became the behavioral approach. ठीक है. And one more feature of behavioral approach which you always should remember, that it was basically what? It was inductive. It was largely inductive in its approach. ठीक है. So I think we are clear now with the behavioral approach. Now let us see the development of behavioral approach. The development of behavioral approach. So if we talk about the development of behavioral approach, can I say behavioral approach, like any idea, has developed in geography in phases. ठीक है. So development of behavioral approach has occurred in 3 phases. It has occurred in 3 phases. And if you talk about its development in 3 phases, initially its extent, or you can say the spread was limited. फिर से वो example use कर सकते हैं. The diffusion rate of behavioral approach. ठीक है. We can say that originally behavioral approach started in phase 1, phase 2 and phase 3. So it occurred in 3 phases. So first की बात करते हैं phase 1. Phase 1, and phase 1 was, we can say it was before 1970. Before 1970, it was phase 1. And if we talk about this before period, कुछ हमने already बात किया है, so we'll just talk about that. So initially, as we said, initially behavioral approach entered into geography through physical geography. And here essentially, it was the case of hazard studies as part of environmental geography. ठीक है. So here, yesterday we talked about, can you mention here the contributions of people like Gilbert, White? Yes or no? Other people like Cates, they were mainly pioneers in use of behavioral approach in hazard studies. कल ही मैंने इसके बारे में लिखवाया था, so I am not repeating that. Do you remember? Yes or no? So in this phase only, it was behavioral approach was limited to whom? It was limited to few pioneer scholars. ठीक है. Another was very importantly in human geography, it was introduced through works of Julian Wolpert. And Julian Wolpert presented a research paper on labor productivity of farms in Sweden, labor productivity of the farms in Sweden, and this was in early 1960s. He researched and presented this paper, and he in this came to conclusion that allowance must be made for man's finite abilities to perceive and store information, store information, to compute optimal solutions and to predict the outcome and future events. Comma, even if profit were his only goal. Even if profit were his only goal. Okay. So because we have different abilities to see the information, to calculate that information, to store that information, and ultimately come to a solution. Even if our ideas are very noble, even if our ideas are like, if only suppose I am even thinking only like an economic rational man, I just want profit, then also my decisions might not lead to the best possible profit that can be attained because of these factors. Okay. So what happened? Wolpert found, or Wolpert suggested, that there was difference in the decisions, different in the decisions taken by farmers of Sweden than those taken by the theoretical rational economic human, than those taken by the rational economic humans. Okay. And he ultimately concluded that farmers of Sweden were essentially what they were. At best, they were satisficers. This was a term actually coined by your Herbert Simon about satisficers. So we get ultimately satisfied even with suboptimal decisions. Okay. And if you talk about Wolpert, he was so much motivated by this research that Wolpert continued this theme with studies on migration. Again in 1960s. So what he found that gravity models were inadequate. They were inadequate to represent such flow patterns that is flow patterns of migration. Why? Since humans are only boundedly rational. They are boundedly rational and they take sequential decisions. On the basis of place utilities. On the basis of the place utilities. Okay. So I'll just explain what he's trying to say. That flow patterns are more complex. I have given you one example of that. It is not necessary that if a place is nearby, there would be greater flow from that. There has to be other factors which are also involved. Or suppose a person is taking decision to migrate. It is not necessary that he would go to the nearby center only. Like for example, suppose you take the case of suppose you live in this village X. It is located in Bihar, and you know, so much in news was that in Bihar there was hardly any job, etc. It was so much in news, and here there are two cities which are located. One is, suppose I am just giving a random aspect to you, Delhi, suppose Delhi, Kolkata, and there is one which is Mumbai. Tell me, in this case, very clearly Mumbai is far away compared to Delhi, Kolkata. But in case of Mumbai, suppose there is a relative, your relative who is staying. In case of Delhi, Kolkata, there is no one who you know. Which of these you will prefer to migrate? बताओ मुझे. Obviously, it would be Mumbai. Obviously, it would be Mumbai. दिल्ली कोलकाता जाना भी चाहोगे तो घर वाले नहीं भेजेंगे. They want someone to be on who can look after you. ठीक है. So very clearly what will happen, these decisions are very complex and they just cannot be measured like what gravity models were just basing it on the distance. They are based upon what? Place utilities. and यहाँ पर एक utility क्या थी place की? That there is a relative living there. ठीक है. So we have we know about the utilities of a particular place. Many times you know these utilities might be perceived utilities. हो सकता है कि वहाँ पर गए तो वो relative you know पूछता भी नहीं है and he is like कि यहाँ क्यों आ गए, you have to find new place etc etc. So many times it can happen that those realities that we are talking about might be only such perceived realities, but people have those realities in mind. ठीक है. or utilities, place utilities in mind. The information on which such place utilities are calculated are far from complete. Are far from complete, and sometimes even none. ठीक है. In essence, what he is trying to say is these are very complex decisions which are being taken by the people. So this is what we call it as, thus Wolpert was the person who heralded the so-called behavioral approach in human geography. Heralded the so-called behavioral approach in human geography. And Wolpert, several associates of Wolpert also worked side by side. And if you talk about one of the associates who has also later on continued, and he was also a very important pioneer scholar, and he was none other than Gollage. So Gollage in 1969-70, what he did, he developed models of learning about space, and spatial behavior. Similarly, there was another, it was Brown. In 1967, he developed methods of spatial behavioral research. ठीक है. So there were several other pioneer scholars who continued to work. So in the first phase, let us see. In the first phase, we can say that behavioral approach was in its nascent stage of development. And what was happening? It was limited to the work of some key scholars or some pioneer, लिखो, key मत लिखो, pioneer scholars. Second thing. Third thing here, the most of the studies relied upon the Simons or Herbert Simons theory of behavior. ठीक है. So it was very in this phase, it was in very infancy stage of development in the first phase. Then after 1970s, the real development began. So second phase, and this second phase, if you talk about, we can say that it started from late 60s and continued till late 70s and early 80s. ठीक है. This is the period we can say that second phase lasted. And if we talk about the second phase of behavioral geography, number of things occurred in the second phase of behavioral geography. So there were a number of people who were involved. पहले इसका मैं बेसिक आइडिया बता देता हूँ, and then we will see that how it has, और the contributions को बाद में बताऊंगा. So just first let us see how it was. So we can summarize that during this phase, focus of behavioral approach was on study of patterns of behavior in space. This is a very, very important keyword. Patterns of behavior in space. That means very clearly what was happening during this phase. Behavioral approach was strongly guided by positivistic ideals, positivistic objectives. Positivistic objectives. So what was the case here? Focus was on study of patterns of behavior. Rather than on finding the causes of behavior. Finding the causes of behavior. ठीक है, I'll just give you one example of this. Suppose I give you two questionnaires, again using that ranking order procedure. And in the first questionnaire, there is order your preference. Order your preference. So tell me, preferences can be first child male, second child male, first child female, second child female, third child male, third child female. So this is one questionnaire. Second, which, or we can say rank these according to their importance to you. According to their importance to you. So for example, social pressure, peer pressure, economic consideration, peer के साथ यहाँ पर family लिख सकते हैं, peer family pressure, economic consideration, others like nationalistic consideration, religion, etc. So tell me, if I am giving you this A questionnaire and this B questionnaire, in which of these I want to know about the cause of your behavior? Tell me. Cause of the behavior. While in which of these I am trying to understand the pattern of behavior. In which of these I am just trying to focus only on the what and not on why. Very clearly it is A, where I am trying to focus upon the what, the pattern of behavior. Okay, so tell me, can I say on the basis of that, this information, can I make a map of India with respect to people's behavior towards girl child? Yes or no? People's behavior towards the girl child. But can I say, with this I won't be able to explain the cause of their behavior. Okay, which of these is more easy to attain, to study, and even come to some general conclusions? Like I can say, like tell me, can I say here, I can say that with this information, if I do in India, I can come to general conclusion that as you go towards the north and northwest, particularly in India, the preference for the female child or girl child declines. Can I come to general conclusion? Behavior of people towards girl child is negative. Okay? So it becomes much easier when I am just focusing upon this first way, that is the what. But very clearly here I am neglecting the more complex thing, why. Okay? So can you understand behavioral approach in the initial phase? In fact, not only here, it was also here. ये जो पीछे वाला हमने phase बताया, first phase, in first phase also it is the same case. The focus was on study of what? It was on study of patterns of behavior in space. Patterns of behavior in space. ठीक है? Are we clear about this? Patterns of behavior in space. So focus was on just understanding the pattern of behavior rather than going into the causes of behavior. Why? Because it was more easy to initially formulate models and theories. And why geographers were doing, behavioral geographers were opting for this kind of approach? Because what was their objective? Their objective was to formulate models and theories. ठीक है, that was their objective, to formulate models and theories. And if you want to formulate models and theories, it would be very difficult if you go into the why. But it was much easier if you just focus upon the patterns of behavior in space. ठीक है, so during this period we find that number of you can say contributions, new approaches developed. So if we talk about some of the important works which started during this period and continued even in the last phase, but we'll see some of them. Very importantly, it was this period mental map developed in behavioral approach. ठीक है, अब देखो मेंटल मैप बहुत सारी बुक्स में इट इज रिटन एज अप्रोच, mental map approach. ठीक है, many geographers have just named it as or called it as approach, but we, depending upon what was our understanding of difference between approach and method. ठीक है, essentially mental map, I would call it as a mental mapping method, because it was a particular way of solving the problem. So it was more of a method. But you know, geographers, पहले भी बताया कि majority of geographers don't have a training in philosophy, so they don't understand the differences between these terms like method, approach. So very clearly, many times they are using these terms like methods, approaches very loosely. Can you understand what I am saying? Yes or no? So here I am saying mental mapping method, but if you see in books mental mapping approach, even in question mental mapping approach, you should not be confused, because many times in geography method and approach are very interchangeably and loosely used terms. So let us talk about this mental map. And you know, mental map question has already been asked in the examination. So if you talk about the mental maps, the term was first in fact used by a geomorphologist, very famous one, Woolridge, and he used this term first in 1956. And so from his work it entered in geographical literature. So for him, what was mental map? It was description of the perceived environment within which farmers make their land use decisions. Land use decisions. But if you talk about mental map, the main person who can be said to be the person who made it popular method or approach in behavioral geography, it was Peter Gould. Yesterday we talked about Peter Gould. So Peter Gould, first in 1966, he wrote a paper, and in his paper he wrote that if we grant that spatial behavior is our concern, then the mental images that men hold that men hold of the space around them. Space around them may provide key. Key to understand some of the structures, patterns, and processes of man's work on the face of the earth. On the face of the earth. ठीक है. So first person who made this approach very popular, it was Peter Gould. And if you talk about Gould, what Gould found that location decisions are taken with regard to perceived environmental reality. What people see, what people perceive, what is the reality. ठीक है. Thus, to understand this perceptive environment, this perceptive environment, he developed a method for identification of common elements. Oh sorry, एक मिनट रुक जाओ. First 1 minute. He developed to understand this perceptive environment. What he did, he developed it was Gould mental or Gould's ranking order procedure. Gould's ranking order procedure. Ranking order procedure. So in all this, what we were doing here when we were talking about this ranking, when we were doing this is basically what is Gould's ranking order procedure. So through that, what you are doing, you're trying to study the mind of a person. Okay. He also did what? He also developed a method for identification of common elements, and this was basically what? It was group mental map method. So many times what happens, decisions are not taken solely by individuals. Decisions are taken in consultation with other individuals. Particularly you take the case of family. Okay. Similarly in society, a particular groups can be there. There can be presence of caste groups, there can be presence of religious groups. Okay. Racial groups can be there, or regional groups can be there. So many times what happens, there's such decisions, like you see the case of village. Many decisions people take in consultation with each other. So for this he also developed a group mental mapping method. ठीक है. So very important person was he. ठीक है. Now if I just first little bit talk about the mental map approach, Down has identified that there were two approaches within mental mapping. Two approaches within mental mapping. And if you talk about the two approaches within mental mapping, first was the structural approach. The structural approach. So structural approach was used. It inquires into the nature of spatial information. Information stored in people's mind. In people's mind, and which they use in their everyday life. Everyday life. Second was evaluative approach. Second was the case of evaluative approach. So in case of evaluative approach, what is being studied? In evaluative approach, what is being studied? What factors do people consider important? What factors do people consider important about their environment? Environment, and how having estimated the relative importance of these factors, do they employ in their decision making? In their decision making. Okay. So that is evaluative approach. Now you will tell me, structural approach, it inquires into the nature of information which is stored in the mind of the people, which they are using in everyday life. And evaluative approach is trying to understand why they are doing like this. So in our case, when we were doing the ranking order procedure, which of this highlighted the structural approach and which of these highlighted the evaluative approach of mental mapping? Tell me. Very clearly the A is about structural approach while B is the evaluative approach. Okay. So out of these two approaches, tell me in phase 2 which approach of mental mapping would have been prevalent in the second phase that we are talking about, where the focus is on study of spatial behavior, patterns of behavior in space. So can we now we know what is mental mapping? Okay. So can I say in the second phase, can I talk about this in the देखो फिर से गड़बड़ कर रहा है. In the second phase, it was structural mental mapping approach which was mainly utilized. ठीक है. So that is basically the case of structural mental mapping. Then there was others also, and very important person in this regard was Pred. In the development of this kind of geography was Pred. So let us look into the contribution of another person, Pred. So Pred focused upon what? Pred basically, देख लेना यार मुरारी, now let me continue, otherwise it will be. So Pred, if you talk about, he developed number of things. One important contribution of his was behavioral matrix. He developed behavioral matrix. So behavioral matrix was essentially what? It was a kind of method he developed, although Pred himself called it as the first approach or first theory, sorry. So what was this behavioral matrix of Pred? On this side, perfect solutions. As I am going towards this side, I am going towards perfect knowledge. Is it with everyone? Needed यार. Now it is fine. Okay. So when we are going towards this, we are going towards perfect solution, towards perfect knowledge. When we are talking towards this, here it is your depends upon to use knowledge. On this side, we are talking about the quality and quantity. Quantity of information. Quality and information. So tell me, when we are talking about this behavioral matrix, what we find quality of and quantity of information. सबसे पहले हम philosophers names and theories read again and again. There is one we are talking about towards perfect solutions, other we are talking about towards perfect knowledge, and that is what I am going to explain now. Ability to use knowledge, here quality and quantity of information. So here on this side it is about knowledge, quality and quantity of information. So if you talk about because is it pronounced यार 2000 में तो मैं खुद वहाँ पहुँच जाऊँगा. Okay. I will complete this just behavioral matrix. It would be there in the videos, so you can go back and watch it later on. I am just going to continue with it. Okay. So when we are talking about this quality and quantity of information, what we find that because of this ultimately is function of what? It is function of your location in geographical space. I am saying that I am continuing because last का वो वीडियो आ जाएगा तो उसके बाद देख लेना. Okay. Function of your location in geographical space. It is very clear. Like for example, tell me, if I am living in a remote area, can I say a remote village, for example, the amount of knowledge that I will have would be limited. It is but obvious. However, if I am living in a city like metropolitan city like Delhi, it is obviously that the amount of knowledge, information that I would have for taking various decisions, they would be much more. Okay, you must have seen yesterday there was anniversary of your demonetization, so याद आ गया मुझे. So you know, if you talk about demonetization, in fact it was day before yesterday था ना. Yes, if you talk about demonetization, those people who are living in cities, did you see how fast information reached to them? जैसे वो Modi talked about that, ultimately people rushed towards ATMs and वो line लग गया and ATMs began to become empty. And next day from in the bank people went on to ultimately change the money. But when it came to matrix is a different approach. It is a different thing which was talked about by Pred. मेंटल मैप वहां पर हमारा ओवर हो गया था. Okay. On the other hand, when it was like village people, Did you see that even when the time was getting over, there were so many people still standing in line, and they were trying to exchange their money. Basically, what was the case? Because to them the information reached very, very late. So your geographical position, the geographical space where you are located in geographical space, it is very, very important. It would determine how much information you will have. Okay? So that is first thing. Then ability to use knowledge, if you talk about, ability to use knowledge is a function of your, it is function of aspiration levels, comma, experience and norms of the group or society in which you are residing. Okay? So that would ultimately determine your ability to use the knowledge towards perfect solution. So even if you have all information in front of you, it is not necessary that you will be able to use that information. Like I gave the example of that child, where if he asks questions to his father and father always becomes angry and he's saying, why you are asking question to the father? So in this case, what will happen? This child will never develop the ability to think critically. Okay? Again, other factor like experience, because if you have taken many decisions, you have failed or you have succeeded, that would determine also your experience levels and also your aspiration level, how much you are interested, how much your mind works, how much motivation you have. Okay? So all these would determine. Now, Pratt says what? That individuals he says that individuals do not stay at the same position in the matrix at the same position in the matrix. So what happens? They continue to learn. And their position keeps on shifting. Their position keeps on shifting. As they shift, and make new decisions, they change the environment. They change the environment in which they operate. And ultimately with time, they can become decision leaders. Okay? What he is actually trying to say that as you are going in this matrix towards the right hand side, if you go towards right hand side bottom, can I say you are becoming more and more better decision makers? If you take continuously, if you take good decisions, always correct decisions, you think more rationally, you take better decisions, can I say your progress in the matrix would be towards the right hand side bottom corner? Yes or no? Tell me. Can we say that? Okay. So you keep on moving towards the, so normally individuals keep on maturing and moving towards the right hand bottom corner in the matrix. But occasionally there can be situations external environmental changes. External environmental changes which can be called as simply shocks, due to which decisions can fail. So again, what will happen? Then individuals would shift back. They would be shift back and another learning curve would start. Another learning curve would start. For example, you might be aware, like 2015 was one of the periods when pulses production in India peaked. One of the peak period of production of pulses. So it was found that just before the election, 2014 election, the commodity prices increased, and it was just a case of hoarding, and so ultimately it was a kind of political game where black marketeers and hoarders ultimately what they did, increase the prices, pressure on the government, the present government, and ultimately the opposition gained advantage and came to power. Now in this scenario, what happened? Farmers particularly in fact this phenomena continued even after the election. 2014 में elections थे, उसके बाद भी this hoarding actually continued, and farmers ultimately thought that it would be better time to go for pulses. Commonly farmers resort to pulses in the either in the Rabi season is very popular, or even if you talk about the Zaid season, they normally go for, but many times they can also go in the Kharif season. So they thought that this is the ideal time because the prices of the pulses were very high. So there was increase in the total area of production of the pulses that year, 2015, and it was found that production of the pulses peaked. Productivity was also very good and production was very high.